The 2023 Africa Mining Indaba kicks off tomorrow until the 9th of February in Cape Town under the theme Unlocking African Mining Investment, Stability, Security and Supply. The meeting by various industry stakeholders and experts takes place on the back of numerous challenges in that industry. So what are they? Well, we are joined now by Ms. Dineo Peta from Peta Attorneys. She's the founder there. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time this morning. Perhaps a brief introduction for our viewers and also tell us about your scope of work.
Good morning, Dudu. Thank you for having me on your show. Peta Attorneys is a boutique law firm that specializes in, amongst others, mining law, where we provide advice on the regulation and policy as it pertains to mineral regulation and policy. We also provide regulatory compliance advisory to our clients. And further to that, we provide commercial transactions and mining litigation services.
Sure. How would you characterize the mining industry in South Africa in 2023?
You know, I would imagine that in light of the current energy crisis, the mining industry is also facing great challenges. As we are aware, mining operations are heavily reliant on sustainable supply of energy to carry on their operations and conduct their operations. So we are possibly may see a dip within this year, but conversely, we've seen a lot of mining companies that have been proactive in terms of sourcing renewable means of energy supply for their operations, and this is across the entire mining value chain, from electrifying the operations through to the equipment and electrifying the equipment that they use within the operations. So I think it requires, a lot of proactiveness from industry in terms of how they'll be able to manage the energy crisis and its impact on their operations.
Sure. Please do indulge me on this. You mentioned compliance as your scope of work as well. I mean, today we are in Barberton in Mpumalanga as we mark exactly 7 years since 3 families lost their loved ones. To date, they have not been brought to the surface. And so when we speak of compliance on the part of mine owners, what should we understand about this particular situation, or perhaps your understanding?
So compliance is critical, and in the example that you mentioned, it speaks to compliance to a mine's mining work program to see, how have we designed our operations, but importantly, environmental compliance. The issue of, for instance, if we speak to Barberton, a lot of operations that happen in Barberton are gold mines, and what we see there is defunct and derelict mines, which are as a consequence of non-compliance by mining companies to their environmental obligations that has led to mine shaft being left unrehabilitated, operations being unsafe, and mining areas, historic mining areas remaining unsafe. And, what we typically advise, our clients from a compliance perspective, particularly in that regard, is issues of concurrent mining. So you don't leave rehabilitation to 30 years down the line when your operation ceases, but it becomes a concurrent process that is executed concurrently with your mining operations. And I think we've got the very strong legislation, and we're seeing our enforcement agencies coming also very strongly in terms of ensuring regulatory compliance. So there's a lot of room for improvement, but there's also great measures that government is implementing, particularly from a policy perspective. On, for instance, if I can go to the Barberton example that you gave and the issue of illegal mining, government has set forth a task force between the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, together with the South African Police Services, to target issues of non-compliance. And also we also have the Green Scorpions that assist as well in terms of compliance.
And then you mentioned a little bit earlier on the issue of electricity, but we also know that we've got problems when it comes to the railways in South Africa. And so how does that impact operations from what your clients are telling you, right, in terms of getting certain departments to work more effectively, as we're seeing more trucks on the roads? Some arguing very well from the industry that that need not be the case.
Yeah, so it is a real problem. The issue of security of rail for minerals that are transported by rail, and it necessitates, I think, greater partnership between the various stakeholders, particularly the Department of Public Enterprises, the Department of Transport, and the Department of Mineral Resources. However, one of the problems or challenges that we have is how the various roles within government remain fragmented. But this is something that presidency is looking at having, certain task teams that are designed specifically to deal with certain issues and technical issues within the industry.
Ma'am, just maybe finally for us, just how relevant is the mining indaba, would you say, in 2023?
It's very relevant because mining is the backbone of the South African economy, but also the African economy as a whole. And I think the world relies heavily on mineral resources. So it will always remain a critical sector. However, looking at the issue of just transition, we need to look at now how we're going to mine sustainably with a reduction and less reliance on fossil fuels, and we need to look at how we power up our operations differently. But in terms of extraction of minerals, that will always be a key issue, to always be topical, and I think perhaps most relevant to the mining industry, and particularly to the mining indaba this year in particular, is to say, in light of the existing energy crisis, how do we as South Africans and South African businesses structure ourselves to be able to provide solutions to government that will assist in dealing with the energy crisis? So it really remains a relevant sector. It will remain a relevant sector for a very long time. It's just about how do we now, going forward, mine sustainably to meet the commitments that we have set for just transition. However, in meeting just transition, we also need to be mindful to the unique socio-economic circumstances of South Africa. And we cannot really take a blanket or a Western approach and apply it to African problems in light of the distinct nature of our socio-economic circumstances.
Speaking of which, how should we understand that the export of coal from South Africa, top-tier coal, is sitting over 600%. Some figures being bandied about indicate that it's at some 700%. So aggressively, coal is moving out of South Africa. You speak of the just energy transition, which has divided opinion in South Africa, and the move to sustainable, methods or solutions to also help the environment. You also speak of the nuanced socio-economic conditions of South Africa, and also understanding this in the context that a country like the United Kingdom as well, for instance, they've made it known that they'll be opening or mining a coaling plant, removing a certain village, and people there and environmentalists are fighting this. Some countries are also facing an energy crisis in Europe, and they're looking at coal. And so what kind of conversations can we expect to come out from the mining indaba about that?
So I think one of the key conversations that will come is particularly the sustainable mining and the sustainable use of coal. I think coal will always remain, I actually don't think it's a fact, coal is a dominant energy source across the world that is heavily reliant on for the supply of electricity. So it will always become a resource that will be vital. And also, if we look at it from a policy perspective, we had to have regard to the Integrated Resource Plan of 2019. It specifically factors coal amongst its renewable energy mix. So I think really the critical issue with coal, yes, for me, in my opinion, And from stats, it is a dominant source of energy, heavily relied on. It is, however, of necessity in light of our commitments.
Ma'am, thank you very much for your time this morning. Dineo Peta of Peta Attorneys.